So in this video, I'm going to show you how you video grade on a Nikon camera. Stay tuned. So when it comes to video grading on Nikon cameras, people often believe that just because I have a Nikon camera, it doesn't mean that I can't color grade. All you really need to do is you set on your Nikon camera the neutral profile picture. And shout outs to my buddy NewPix, who I found out that you can actually download custom profile pictures into your Nikon camera. But for the sake and ease of this video, I just set my Nikon camera to a neutral profile picture. And if you want to know the exact settings, I'm going to link another video in the description. Check that out. But I've made a couple of these videos already, and essentially when it comes to having video grade and video grading Nikon footage, all you need to do is you make sure that the saturation on the contrast is on somewhat of a lower setting, because Nikon cameras tend to have oversaturation and over contrasting images and videos because they do that on purpose to have, I guess, a more of a sharper look to sell the product, like this camera. But for a videographer perspective, you want less saturation for images and videos and less contrast. Why? It allows you to push and pull the blacks and whites within your video as well as the colors. So I've made a couple of these videos on Adobe Premiere, so all you need to do is you drag and drop your footage into your Adobe Premiere timeline. And then what I like to do is like to put on the Luma color scopes, and you want to look at whether or not your blacks or whites are either overexposed or unexposed, and you want to put them, I like to put them at 10 and close to the highlights around 100. And after you put on the Luma scopes within the effects tab of the Adobe Premiere, then what you like to do is I like to check on my curves. So I like to see the levels of whether or not my blacks and whites are being overexposed or unexposed. Once you establish that your blacks and whites are within the proper exposure settings, you like to set your white balance. And when it comes to help you even more, you want to make sure your Nikon has its proper white balance setting, because sometimes it can be too cold or too warm, and that will mess up your video grading process. So in order to have your white balance leveled up on top of your already embodied white balance, you click on the teardrop or the eye drop tool. You click that and you want to go in your image and find where is the whitest video image within your video. So you click that. And sometimes Premiere, it's usually a 50-50 mix of whether or not it's going to get the proper white balance. And you can also adjust the sliders to make sure there's more tint or make it more warmer or more colder. Now that you got the proper curves within the blacks and whites, now they have the proper white balance, the next part is you want to control whether or not you're going to have highlights, contrast. For me personally, I like to have little less contrast, so then there's more midtones within the video. So I actually decrease the contrast. And I also brighten up the image just a little bit, because when I shoot cinematic videos, I want my videos to be a tad underexposed, because you're better to be either right on when it comes to proper exposure than being overexposed when it comes to your videos. So now that I have the proper contrast and overall look, you can slowly start to see my own personal LUT or adjustment layer that I put on my cinematic video grades when it comes to these Nikon videos. So now after that, you can there's two different types that you can do. One, you can apply a LUT on top of these already pre-existing things that I told you about, or two is you can go on a three-way color corrector, which essentially allows you to control what colors you want your shadows to be. So you can, for example, make your shadows blue, and then on top of that, you can control your midtones and as well as your highlights. And I can't tell you specifically because video grading is such subjective and it's very creative in a sense. I find a lot of pleasure when it comes to video grading because it does have a very artistic feel to it. For me personally, depending on the mood of the video or what I'm trying to go for and the look, sometimes I like yellow midtones, sometimes like blue shadows and red highlights, maybe sometimes blue highlights. It really depends on the video and what environment that you're shooting in, so you can eventually get the right feel for it. And once you have that, pretty much the proper You have your 3 color corrector, you have your blacks and whites exposed correctly, as well as your auto white balance. That is essentially the basics of the Luma tree and the overall color correction within Adobe Premiere. This works for anywhere from your 2018 Creative Cloud version all the way down to 2015 and even 2014 Adobe Premiere. So when it comes to video grading and video color grading within Nikon videos, that is how, and yes, it is possible, and that is how I video grade my videos. Because when it comes to color grading, it is so subjective, and you can color grade, video grade any video. As long as the video format, your ability to color grade something really depends on whether or not how saturated the raw video file is and whether or not how contrasted it is. Because take the rule of thumb is that you want your videos or images to be bland and less saturated as possible. And once you take those raw image files or folders and videos, you put them into your processing. Whether that's, for example, if you're taking pictures, that's Photoshop, Lightroom. If you're taking more videos, then you put that into Adobe Premiere. Then you can apply the creative process of video grading. And here are some examples from my Nikon D5200 of video grading examples of what you can actually do with this camera. Because whenever I video grade, people are often surprised that I can actually do this on a Nikon camera. And if you wanted more tips and tricks within Adobe Premiere, there's actually a Udemy course right below, gives you the whole basic breakdown of how you edit a video from beginning to end if you're a complete beginner within 30 minutes. And my name is Peter, and that is how I video grade and color grade my Nikon videos. And you're watching Broke Visionary Collective, where we all start with nothing, but you can always create something.